order. Thank you everyone who was able to navigate my Zoom invite. We're here on the 21st at Thursday at 7:15 p.m. in the 13th meeting of the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee. And this meeting is being conducted using remote pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner. They may watch live on YouTube at /Westborough TV or on Verizon Channel 28 or Charter Channel 192. Or you may watch a recorded version on westboroughTV.org under the Government tab, Meetings on Demand. A review of the agenda. We have Mike's minutes from our meeting on the 11th were distributed this morning. And then we're going to review the draft budget as we had outlined in our last meeting, sort of doling it out between different members of the group for different sections. And then we'll review future draft agendas, chairman and liaison reports, public reminders, and then we will adjourn. Does anybody have any question on the minutes?
Would you like a motion?
Sure.
I apologize, don't have them in front of me. What was the date of the minutes?
It was January 11th.
Motion to accept the minutes of January 11th, 2021.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Walter. Any discussion?
Look good to me.
Yeah.
All right. I'll go around the screen here. Ms. Ford.
Ms. Ford, yes.
Yes. Mr. Beretti.
Yes.
Mr. Leslie.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Ms. Blumberg.
Blumberg, yes.
And Mr. Hugel.
Yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Hey, all right. And Keo, yes. Okay, 800. All right. So maybe Andrew, before we get started, you can tell us how you actually managed to get into the meeting for future reference.
So once I had the phone number, and the passcode, so the phone number wasn't on the invite, but once I had the phone number, once you're in the invite, there's an option to join audio, and it gives you a computer and a phone call. And if you click on the phone call, you'll find the conference ID and the passcode.
Gotcha.
Hey. So that was Paul's idea, basically.
Hey, 8 heads together and we figured it out. Okay.
Yeah, I've been there before.
All right. So reviewing the budget, I think just to begin with, overall, in my mind, the goal for tonight is to try and ensure that we come up with the questions that we want to submit to town managers and department heads for that hopefully they will then answer next Thursday at our offsite. I think that's the primary goal, that and just sort of anything in the book that seems contradictory. So if in one section you see one thing and somewhere else you see something that seems to contradict that, we just want to request confirmation on things like that. Are there any other things that folks are hoping to get out of this discussion today?
Did we ever get the school budget?
No, not yet. My apologies. I forgot to ask for it in a timely manner. And they may actually be in Irene's office, but it hasn't been confirmed yet.
I want it electronically anyhow. I don't know.
Right. But I mean, I haven't gotten that information yet either.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
So could we get it for next Monday, Beth?
I will do my best.
Okay.
I
thank
don't
you.
know that I can make that promise because I don't have it.
Okay,
We'll see.
thanks.
It's not like I have a copy.
Right. Right.
Hank, you don't have one either, right?
I'm looking right now. I've got something.
So,
There's a school budget overview presentation dated November 4th, 2020. I think that's the budget.
And that's not the budget book. We've gotten the budget book in the past.
Oh, okay. I can't deal with that level of detail.
we've gotten the highlights and
Yeah, we have gotten some past the presentations. Those you should all have. If you don't have those, I can send them on.
but yeah, I think at some point the details, it'd be great as well.
Yeah.
I don't think I have that presentation. I saw it online, when they presented it, but I don't think I ever got a
Right.
copy.
All
It's
right.
on the web. It's on the school
Okay.
website.
Okay, I'll get it there. Thank you.
Okay.
One thing I did learn today, so the selectmen meet on Tuesday. Well, I guess this can be at the end, but the selectmen meet on Tuesday. They're going to discuss with the Board of Health whether or not the current date for the town meeting is doable. Or if it's, we should just expect it to be pushed out. So that discussion will be coming up at this Tuesday's meeting. They're also going to be discussing some of the warrant articles in detail. I imagine specifically the town seal. So if people want to watch that as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. See here. With that being said, why don't we just go section by section? And I think Mike and I took the first sort of 3 sections up until the detailed budget tab. Mike, is there anything specifically up front that you wanted to point out?
Muted.
Nope. Oh, you're on mute.
I did find a contradiction that I'd like to get some information on. There were claims that we would get back to pre-COVID on the local fees, local taxes by 2023. And yet when I looked at the detail in Exhibit E, I didn't see an alignment between the actual numbers and that statement. So I would like to find out from the town manager what she was speaking about there, or whoever wrote that section, because it talked about state funding coming up to pre-COVID levels and the local fees. And I think the state funding is ephemeral at this point. And I think the local fees, again, those numbers don't match. The bottom line, the general fund does come above pre-COVID levels, but my analysis of the numbers suggests that that result is a consequence of property taxes being increased over the next 5 years in the forecast. And we know forecasts are forecasts, but under the current circumstances, I would like them to be a little more specific in why they made that statement.
Mike, Hank Roush, I agree with what you're asking, but I'm wondering if it isn't better to have that conversation with Krista and Leah offline when they come to visit us, as opposed to in that big meeting. I think the big meeting is focused on FY22.
Yeah, Hank, I agree with you. I wasn't suggesting that for the January 28th meeting. I think we need an explanation. I would like to have an explanation by Monday so we could have that conversation among ourselves.
Well, I mean, I think we're going to end up having Christy and Leah come to visit with us anyway. And there's going to be a bunch of stuff we want them to go over, both for the current year and for future years.
Again, I think we're on the same page, Hank, It's a question
Okay.
of timing.
Yes, so I will point that out there, and I think it was in Appendix E, right? Versus what they were saying generally in the management discussion up front.
Correct. And also in Appendix D, they made the same, they repeated that statement.
D, Appendix D, okay,
Yeah, page 5 to be specific.
thank you. All right. And they did go through in the budget message, on pages 9, 10, 11, they specifically went through where the additional costs were things that were partially funded in prior years will now be fully funded. And then they talked about, there's an increase in the Council of Aging, and it looked like this past year, they received some sort of COVID grant to cover part of their costs, which was helpful, but now that goes back towards the full budget. And I'll just take a look at that within the line items, that there was a reduction this year, and then it's an increase again next year. But overall, I appreciate they explained everything pretty well.
This is Beth. I have a quick question because there was COVID funding that was good up till December 31st, and now it seems like there's additional batch of COVID funding. What fiscal year is the current new funding in?
Fiscal 21.
Okay, so it's not part of the budget still. It's,
Well, I mean, it would have to show up as a revenue source on the revenue sheets on the budget. And I'm not seeing any COVID state or federal COVID funding on the revenue sheets.
well, it seems to, I mean,
Because
obviously,
COVID funding is not an expense, so it's not going to show up in the expense part of the budget.
right.
And it's not showing in the funding part. So it's got to be an FY21 revenue source that,
Will probably go away. Okay.
yeah, I mean, again, we got to be careful. COVID funding is not an expense. It's a revenue source. And theoretically, it's a revenue source to compensate for the increases caused by the COVID epidemic. Unless we're planning on the COVID epidemic extending all the way through fiscal 22, we shouldn't be including costs for a COVID epidemic in FY22.
Right.
So, you know, if the Council on Aging is saying that they need more money because they got government offsets in 21, that doesn't make sense, because the COVID offsets would not have been included in their budget in FY21. It would have been an offset after the budget was agreed to.
Yeah, well, you know what, maybe we can ask about that. Here it specifically says they were partially funded in 2021 by gift funds. And so I think it was specific. I don't know that it was an actual COVID funds as so much as they used an individual gift to as a short-term cover for it.
Yeah, they ought to explain where, I mean, again, I just need to explain to us, where did the gift come from and why did the gift go away? And why, since it was a gift, I mean, do we really need to continue the spending? But fundamentally, the question is, to people in general, how do you justify your spending? And in particular, please justify your increases in spending. Are you increasing headcount? Or what are you increasing? And why are you increasing it? I mean, quite honestly, Sean, until we have answers to those questions, it's very hard to make intelligent commentary about the budget.
Yeah, I think if you look through pages 9 and 10, most of these additional costs were either approved at fall town meeting or some sort of prior town meeting. So at the fall town meeting, we approved the hiring of the economic development coordinator for the second half of the year, right? So now that then next year, that will then again become a full year position. So I think it's some things that were funded during the year that will now be a full year position. And then you have the SAFER grant with the fire department. You know, each year that gets reduced. So we see an increase there. So I don't think these aren't things that couldn't have been predicted, but they're just being outlined. So we have the background is why we're seeing the percentages we are. And the other one, and Hank, maybe you can help me with this, is there is an increase related to golf course management, but I think it's offset somewhere else, right?
I got to go into the details behind the numbers, but basically what's going on with the golf courses, we're changing the business model. So we're going from a contract manager to a person who's on the payroll. And unfortunately, the way we do our accounting, revenue that came in FY21 cannot be reflected as cash available for FY22. So we're still going through a transition, and that's what's causing the increase. We actually had an increase in revenue in 21 over 20, but because of the way the state says you have to recognize revenue, it doesn't show up until FY22.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Again, I think we'll have to get the golf course team to explain to us what they're doing and why it makes sense to continue.
Yeah.
yeah, I had a similar question that it looked like, well, you saw the part where the new position goes up in salary, but the expenses seem to have sort of gone up too, which you'd think because they're not hiring somebody on a contract, it would go down. But yeah, I don't know. But like you said, Hank, if we get somebody in that explains it, that'd be good.
Right. In my apologies, I'm going over these first few pages, but it is also, I think, somebody else is going to go over this when we get to that section. So I'll speed up a little bit here. On page 14, there's the assessed valuation projections. And for commercial and industrial, especially commercial, they're estimating a big hit. And so I think
Or do you want me to? And I mean,
Sure, if you can. that'd be
I
helpful.
will claim host because I do have a paid account and maybe that'll,
Go
oh,
right
there's
ahead.
a host key to claim host. So I can't claim host without knowing the key.
I'll work on that. Let's, so I'm going to ask a question about the assessed valuation projections, just because it shows commercial going down, and see if the town assessor can explain that to us. The revenue sources, the state revenue goes up by 800,000. I believe that's directly the kindergarten full day. So I think that is covered. I don't have any questions on the revenue assumptions.
I guess my question on that, if maybe I'm not getting it, but is, since we're getting that 800,000, even though the non-school town expenses are going up 5% or whatever, I think maybe the tax rate won't follow to that degree.
Where are we getting 800,000 from?
Reimbursement for kindergarten. So that's like,
That shows, that's in the state revenue line. That's not an.
Right. No, Hank.
it's still there. The money's there, will be there.
I
Right,
was saying that we're showing an 800 grand increase in state revenue, and that's related to the full day kindergarten.
right.
Sean?
Well,
Sean, Jeff Poole just asked, because we got kicked out, if you could turn recording on, just in case they can't get it hooked up to Westborough TV.
Sure.
Could you start recording the meeting? And Jeff, if that's not what you wanted, let me know. Oh, Jeff says they're back live, but maybe record just in case it happens again. Thanks.
Okay.
I had another question on this section. Sean, was the state aid goes up in 2021 from 2016, but goes back down in 2026?
Oh, yeah, I don't know about estimating that far out.
Well, it's on page 15. That's what it seemed.
State aid down in 2026.
On page 15, it has 2016, 2021, and 2026, and the 2026 number is smaller than 2021,
Okay.
but I don't know why.
No,
I can ask that.
I'm not, it's a smaller percentage. Oh, I see.
One's 10 million, one's 12, but the
Right.
bottom line went up, but
Interesting.
Yeah, and
right there,
on page 35, they
they
give
swap columns.
page 35, they give sort of a breakdown of state aid. So you see that 800 additional education due to full day kindergarten.
Well, is it possible that the increase to 12 million in state aid in 21 was an impact of COVID, and then they're expecting that to settle back down?
It's possible.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I think for 2026, I think we just ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because these
Okay.
are all predictions. These are not exact numbers.
Yep. And then they go through the strategic plan. Everything looks pretty straightforward there.
Hey, Sean,
Yes.
before we leave, I got a couple of things I think we need to get clarified, or at least I'd like to get clarified. One is with respect to capital projects. There's a statement on page 12 that the reader needs to be clarified that the debt strategy includes only projects approved through 2019 ATM. Any additional projects will need to seek alternative funding sources or will otherwise, of course, affect the tax rate. They also make that comment elsewhere in the book, in the capital project section, that they would like capital projects to be funded through other sources wherever possible. And that includes grants, et cetera. So I'd like to try to understand how they're balancing that against the requested funding from free cash. And then the other issue that comes up is the debt strategy, and particularly with respect to OPEB. According to the budget book, our liability is 113 million and a few dollars for OPEB. Now, the question then comes up, are they going to continue to fund it through the next fiscal year? And they are not.
They haven't funded it that'll be the second year in a row, Mike, that it hasn't been funded.
That's correct.
If you look in the policy section, one of the appendices, there's a policy that was established to fund it at $1 million a year. The OPEB conversation is the conversation we need to have with the town manager and with Leah. I wouldn't even attempt to have that conversation with this large audience.
No, I'm not suggesting we try to have that conversation tonight. I would like to get a clarification on it, because in fact, in the policy section, or in the section on one of the appendices on debt services, they speak to the concern of this kind of fund not getting fully funded and then coming back to bite us in the future. So I think we should have
OPEB
that
is a topic that we need to have a conversation with
Yes,
the finance folks and the town manager about.
Yep.
And from my perspective, the conversation is, when do you intend to fund it, or do you have some other plan for how you're going to deal with the increasing liabilities? This is essentially off balance sheet debt.
agreed, but it's a debt we're obligated for.
Oh yeah, it's off balance sheet, but it's an obligation, and at the moment we don't have. We seem to have had a plan to deal with it, and for the last 2 years we've abrogated the plan. So now, what's the plan for getting back on track?
Okay, again, we're on the same page, Hank. It's just the timing of the questions.
But Hank, don't you think we should have that with the Board of Selectmen too? Because
No, I
it's
think
their
first we
policy.
start with the town manager. You don't want, that's a very complex technical conversation. You don't want to have complex technical conversations with a cast of thousands.
but we did have it with them last year at this meeting.
Right.
Well,
And
we had the
it's really their
conversation that they
policy.
weren't going to fund it. We didn't have the conversation of what are you going to do about it long term.
Right.
They're totally different conversations.
Okay. All right. What else did you have, Mike? So, but overall, I think everything else was explained pretty well. I think some of the other, in the expenditure overview, we're going to go over some of those percent changes later in the individual sections. So don't really need to talk at that here. It does talk about using free cash again on page 55, and I'm sure that same thing will be addressed with the town manager and the finance director. Are folks good if I skip ahead to the general government section? Yeah. You got the town moderator, the Board of Selectmen, budgets seem pretty straightforward. They do a nice job of going through the strategic plan initiatives. I suggest people take a look at those when they get a chance. The majority of the budgets in here, central purchasing, legal, are flat. There's a drop in the wages and clerical budget for finance. That's due to the that position being removed and moved over to become the human resources coordinator. So that goes into the Board of Selectmen budget. There was one increase here, something called miscellaneous services tax title. It's going from $15,000 to $23,320. So it seemed like there was definitely something specific there that was causing that to jump. That's on page 82. So I'm just going to throw in a quick question related to that. At a future meeting of our group, I will, we can talk to the Advisory Finance Committee budget. In talking to the town manager, I did move around some of the line items there. We increased the wages and clerical because the rate is going up. Even though we don't actually have a clerical person, but in the hopes that we do. And then reduce some of the expenses just because we've never used all the money in those expense lines. But we can talk through that in a future meeting of just this group when we go to approve it or something. I mention it here. And then as expected on page 98, the elections budget, it was budgeted this year for 81,600. Next year, it's budgeted at 37,100. So as you would expect in an off election year, it's down over 50%. So, and, you know, that looks like a pretty comfortable number to me. And wages, clerical goes, you know, from 35K this year to 5K next year. So. And the only significant budget item is for the handsets. So I think overall, those items look in line or as expected. Any questions on the general government tab folks have? Next is community development. See who was working on community development. Paul, was that you? Oop.
Yeah, that's me. I didn't prepare anything for this meeting because, well, one, I didn't know that we were doing that. I didn't catch it that way. But also, since we're having that meeting next week, and everything's changing in that department, it makes, I would imagine that will be a major presentation or whatever focus, just showing how
Okay.
it affects of that. The combining of the building department with the others.
Right.
So sorry about that.
No, that's okay. So there is some realigning there. It looks like their expense budget is flat, and then I think the salaries are related to what we saw happen at fall. The differences are related to fall town meeting primarily.
Right. Making the part year positions the full year changes.
Yeah, if you see anything in there that looks out of line, you know, we can even bring it up Monday and just make sure we shoot a question into the department heads, but I think it looks pretty straightforward.
I will do that. I'll dig through that. There's also warrant articles that are in that department that I'll try to be conversant in better. One of them being that's, I think, just a study for 45,000. I love spending money on studies.
The insurance budget does go up slightly, but given what it's gone up in the past, that looks pretty reasonable.
Did we just lose Westborough TV again?
No,
No, they're right here, down at the bottom. Oh, on the bottom of my screen.
Not on mine, okay.
Okay. All right, so now we're to public safety.
Oh, Jeff.
What page? I'm looking at the electronic version.
123.
Thank you.
Melanie, do you want to go first with the fire department and I'll just follow you with police?
I can, certainly. So kind of to summarize what they're looking at, and do we decide we want to do their capital request as well, Sean?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay. So one of the questions I had in going through the information was about emergency medical services. So obviously with COVID, we've seen an increase, an uptick, and I asked, I wanted to understand where the revenue is being generated. So they anticipate, I think in the budget, it's listed as revenue of 1.7 million, and that's charges that are incurred whenever they make an ambulance run. And we go through like a centralized billing. The chief kind of oversees generating, but somebody else handles the actual billing process. They are anticipating that to increase even more so in the coming year. But with the caveat that also means more wear and tear on kind of the resources that we have, the physical resources. The other thing, they go through what everything does with regard to emergency management, fire prevention, and then training. Again, to Mike Reddy's comment earlier, he's utilized a lot of grants for some of the things that they've asked for historically. I think he's going to continue to look at that. One of my questions, I think, going forward was, have we thought about a centralized grant writer? Do we have a centralized grant writer?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So currently, this is just in this department. He has 11 grants that he's overseeing, which means kind of the juggling of are they meeting the parameters of why we were giving the grant? Are you following the timelines? So 11, you think about that over the course of a year. Most grants are written for year timelines. I think there's one we all know that's coming to an end that had to do with the additional firefighters. And I think that was a 3-year grant or a 2-year grant.
3.
Yeah. So that we're aware of is coming to an end, but we're still going to try. I think they're going to still continue to write. At 11, with all the other things that he does, and I don't know what else some of these other departments, how many grants they're overseeing. I wonder if it would benefit for somebody to.
I think that there's probably this just probably should go through the town manager to talk about, because the people writing the fire department grants are probably very knowledgeable about fire department, and similarly, the school department, I believe it's Irene, is very active writing grants, and also Dan Meyer and people, based on where it is in the curriculum. So they have to be pretty specialized knowledge. And so it may not be that a townwide grant writer makes sense.
I think it's worth a discussion though, Beth. I understand your point.
Yeah.
Coming from an industry that heavily depended on grants, the academic industry.
Yeah.
And it might be worthwhile having a conversation with the town manager, because in effect, what we're doing is taking the time of our department managers who should be leading and managing, and they're involved in research and writing. And there may be a financially beneficial from an efficiency perspective to look at a central one, but that's a conversation we ought to have.
Even the research alone, I don't think you necessarily have to be specialized. The worst that could come of it is they present, we think we have these opportunities, and whoever heads up that particular department says, no, that's a no-go, that's a no-go. Yeah, we could look into this one.
Mhm.
But it frees up their time.
Okay.
So,
But
okay.
You make a good point also, though, that just even the reporting of the results or data that you have to return to the grant writers, not grant writers, grantees, or whatever you call them, grantors, that must take a lot of time too. Yeah, you have to end up writing a report to say you did what you promised we did.
Exactly.
The other thing I think about with this is there really any accountability on grants? We don't know if they're getting everyone, if, you know, or they're trying to get everyone that's out there, what their success rate is. So that might be part of that conversation. Is there some overseeing of it, or coordination, so that there's more accountability even? Like it's all just like a plus when it comes in. It sounds great, but what did we miss?
Hank, if you're talking, you're mute.
Who are you talking to?
Hank?
I'm on mute. I mean, we recently did a staffing study for the town. We hired a consulting firm. They did an extensive staffing study. It'd be interesting to understand why they didn't drop something like this out of their staffing study and saying that there would be a lot of efficiency in centralizing some grant writing.
Yeah, Hank, I agree with that, but I have a feeling that the last year and a half has really highlighted our dependency on these items.
Sure.
And maybe it's a good time to look at this. I think Melanie's idea is a thoughtful one, and we should take a look.
Yep. It's a reasonable conversation. We just,
Is it one for next Thursday, you think?
you need to have, I mean, it's no sense having the conversation without the town manager being there, because that's the town manager's job to manage and overview and manage all these departmental activities.
So I can throw out the question to her about sort of grant writing in general, and is there a thought of trying to centralize it, or?
Yeah, but you know, Sean, I agree that it needs to go through the town manager's office first. But given their emphasis in this budget book on using grants and other sources of information for funding going forward, I think it deserves an in-depth conversation with the town manager and the financial director. And maybe when we have a conversation with them at one of our future meetings. I'm not so sure that this would be a subject matter that in a week's time you can develop fully enough to take to that budget summit. But certainly it's something that requires a little bit more analysis on the part of town management to see whether it's a workable idea.
On the other hand, at the budget summit, the players who are writing grants will be there.
Yeah, but you're having a conversation that has to, that you got to have the town manager's position on it. Otherwise, you put her in a really tight box. I mean, you're getting involved in how do you manage your business, and you usually don't do that. I don't favor having that conversation with the subordinates in the room.
I don't see it as necessarily boxing her in as much as if you hear an outcry from people saying this is a lot to manage in addition to everything else, is this a possibility?
I don't have any problem, Melanie, I have no problem with having a conversation. I'm just discussing, this is not a conversation for the forum that we're going to be in on Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, it's not in this budget currently.
Okay.
Ask one question out of ignorance here is you talked about ambulance revenue, but where did, obviously it doesn't show up as an expense. Where does it show up as a revenue?
It shows up on the revenue recap sheet.
Okay,
There's
thanks.
a revenue sheet. I think it shows, I'd have to go back and find it, but I think it shows 1.7 million.
Yeah.
It's Appendix E.
Thanks.
And unfortunately, or fortunately, the way the accounting works, that revenue doesn't go to the fire department, it goes to the general fund. And that's just an artifact of how
Sure.
municipal accounting works.
Yeah,
that's
a
fine.
small portion goes to their stabilization fund. But again, with the increased revenue, you would think that maybe they could increase their stabilization fund, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. So again, as we go through the budgetary piece, and if you look at the successes and accomplishment, he speaks to 500,000. This is just his department in successful grant writing or grant funding. So if we can move to, I guess if we move to some of the requests for the capital pieces that they're looking for in that department. So they're looking for the fire equipment. And this is on page 232, if anybody's following in the book. They talk about the need to, what they're trying to do is gear up for each fire person 2 sets of gear. Because after they've been out on a fire call, it needs to be, the first set of gear needs to be put through an extractor. This is for safety purposes and for longevity of equipment. It looks like they have 18 left to outfit in the second set at a cost of $86,000. And I believe that's in the upcoming budget. Am I reading that correctly?
Oh, gotcha. And that's due to what? I guess them having to deal with COVID and constantly having to clean this equipment. They've been getting away with one set and they really can't do that now.
In the warrant, they're talking about 33 sets.
They are
And they're
talking about
talking-
sets. Yeah.
Well, at least the warrant article that I have in front of me asks for $87,000. And it mentions turnout gear for 33 firefighters.
Okay, but they also state that 15 have already been done.
Right.
Well, but we need to then ask, why does the warrant article say 33 and the
Right.
budget says, this doesn't say 33?
Gotcha.
All I'm doing is reading you the town manager's statement from the warrant article. And what you're saying is that it doesn't seem to compute with the numbers that are in the budget book. Just need to
And the
make the
budget
numbers
says
compute.
86,000, yeah.
Right.
But- So no, I think it's 15 of them so far have 2 sets.
Correct.
The
And there's
other-
the disparity in the numbers is
Right.
18 left to purchase, 33 as a whole were needed.
Okay, so they're legitimately asking for 33 sets of gear, right?
No,
Yeah.
they're asking for 18 more.
Hey, guys, the warrant article, if you pull up the warrant article says 33.
Yep.
Right, and the budget book says 18.
So
So
guys,
that is a question to
guys,
be
the
reconciled.
fire chief can quickly,
Reconcile.
yes, on Thursday. So let's not worry too much about that.
Yeah. So at the bottom of that paragraph, it says currently only 15 of the department members have a second set of gear.
Right.
Okay. I think that one's kind of self-explanatory. The fire equipment with regard to the engine that's on the warrant to be replaced. They talk about the vehicle that they want to move back in their line because it was at the forefront for 10 years. It has a life expectancy of 18 years. By the time we move it back, it's going to be at like 25 years. So we've gotten almost more than the life expectancy out of it. In addition to that, the reason they're asking for the money in this budget is it takes a year to construct the vehicle. So from date of order to actual receipt, we'll actually have, they thought that they would have the money in their fund to cover it. But it's a matter of, they need the approval to make the request and make the purchase. So that's $745,000, and that's what we see in that warrant article.
And the warrant article says $378,000, $378,662.
From free cash.
Oh, I'm sorry,
and the other
from free
is from
cash.
the stabilization fund. The other part of that is
Okay,
basically
336.
money that has been
Okay,
locked away, right?
okay. So 378,662 is hitting the tax line. The rest of it's coming out of
Stabilization.
the revolving fund.
Correct.
That explains why they're buying a fire engine so cheap.
And then, do you want to get into their other requests that are out fiscal year 23?
I think that's the job of the capital review committee, unless we have particular issues that not a good use of our time.
Although I will tell you, there's a request with regard to ambulance that is pushed out to 24. And because of the wear and tear, because of COVID, there's a thing, and I work in this industry. So there's a thing when someone comes to the hospital, and if there is not bed space, it's called holding the wall. And that means that an ambulance that comes in has to hold the patient until there is a bed for the person. Here of late, Memorial Campus and University Campus for UMass has been so busy. Some of our ambulances have been on holding the wall for 3 and 4 hours at a time. That means the piece of equipment is running for that entire period because you have a patient in the back. So that's extra wear and tear on engines and equipment and everything else. So
In addition to tying it up.
yes, and tying up manpower, and because the paramedics are forced to sit there. I won't be surprised if that piece of equipment doesn't come earlier.
Forward sooner.
Yes, than later.
Yeah. So when this capital projects list was put through, it was essentially pre-COVID, right?
It was.
So when the capital.
The
projects-
capital review committee has run over a set of projects recently. I can't remember, one of our people's on capital review
Yeah,
committee.
Yeah, Andrew.
Right,
Yeah,
Andrew,
and
wait,
we
when
reviewed
did you
things in
guys-
December.
right.
You went through it in December, right? December is post-COVID, guys. Let's not get confused.
Yeah.
Well, I think that some of the impacts are going to be happening, and you're probably going to see it next budget, but it doesn't sound like it's happening this budget. So
Yeah, I mean,
Is all
it's
I-
legitimate to ask the chief to comment on his ability to support the workload, but that would be the question, right? Given the increased workload, is it put us at risk that we're going to need to do something between now and the end of the fiscal year?
Hey, so just, sorry, one thing quickly. Okay, so I definitely screwed up setting up this meeting. We may end up getting bounced again. Tell you what, if we do and we don't dial back in again, we can try and wrap up and then we'll just look to do
Sean,
the rest of it.
if we get bounced, do you want me to host it?
I can't, I couldn't, I tried to host this. I can't.
No,
host
but
it.
I mean, I could send out a Zoom link and host it.
We'll tell you what. Why don't you send out a Zoom link to everybody now and we'll switch to that in like 5 minutes.
All right, it'll take me a second to set it up because but I'll do it.
That'd be great, Beth. Thank you very much.
As long
Okay.
as we had to preserve the open meetings, so that as long as,
Oh, thank you. Good call. That I don't know how to do.
You have to send it to Jeff too.
Okay, I can send to Jeff too. That part's easy.
Well, but you didn't post it.
No, the meeting's posted. It's just
The-
the
the
connection.
meeting- the link-
I'm not sure.
the
I'm
link
not
doesn't
sure
get
whether you're
posted.
required to post it so that people can log in.
No, the
Oh.
link
They're not
doesn't
allowed
get
to log in.
posted.
But people don't call in. They just watch it on TV, I thought.
Yeah, the link
Yeah.
doesn't get posted. It's the links that are posted are so people can watch on cable TV or on YouTube or whatever.
Okay, so as long as the cable is running it, we're all set.
Yeah. No, thank you, Beth. And I'll get,
I like the idea of having an ending
Monday.
to the meeting.
oh, sorry, Paul, what was that?
I like the idea of having a sunset on the meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
Makes us more efficient.
All right, sorry, I cut you off there, Melanie. In case
No,
anyone-
Really, that was it. Because the other pieces of equipment that they're looking for are forecasted out for other budgets.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Mike, you want to talk police?
Okay, so there are three sections I just want to briefly touch on: operations, staffing, and capital equipment request. When I looked at the operational budget and discussed it with the chief and the deputy, I wasn't terribly concerned about the numbers that we're looking at. There's an increase of $144,000 in wages, primarily due to obligations under the police contract with respect to education, with respect to COLA raises, with respect to step raises, and shift differential. My
Yes.
Okay. And I think we left with Mike.
Okay. So quickly again, operational budget, staffing, and capital equipment, particularly the items in the warrant. Not seeing anything in my conversations confirmed, my feeling that there's not a significant issue with the operating budget. There was an increase in salaries and wages, again, directly related to contractual obligations and COLA raises and step increases. We are going to absorb a full year of the police patrol position we added in FY21, and that's about $31,000 cost. There is an issue with staffing and continues to be an issue on the night shift. The consequence is that there is an increase, although it's modest, of about $6,500 in the overtime budget. That's a direct result of not just having to bring in an overtime person, but some of the overtime is now being consumed by lieutenants and detectives who are at a higher pay scale. And until they resolve the issue with staffing, and I know that in the budget book that whoever wrote the narrative said that there was going to be a continuing conversation about police staffing going forward. They were planning on putting in a command position to supervise the night shift, and that's been pushed back to the fall. Animal control is being level funded. They are requesting a new vehicle. I think the description in the warrant is clear as to the need. The other two capital items are the two police vehicles, and that's on a regular schedule. What I found to be interesting is that the vehicles being replaced, or vehicles to be replaced if the request is approved, will be given to other departments, and the vehicles being purchased will be hybrid vehicles. We have the same situation with police vehicles as the fire department has with their rolling stock. And it's, just in idle time alone, based on some information from the Ford Motor Company, they add on about 30,000 miles a year to the engine, or the equivalent of 30,000 rolling miles. So this is equipment that can't be subject to failure because of age and wear and tear. So we have to pay attention to that. I think their request for two vehicles seems to be reasonable, all things considered. The other thing that's going to come up, and it's in the article, is the body cam program. And I'm not going to go into too much detail. I think the chief will probably speak to it next Thursday. But we should know that there is an approximate $25,000 a year maintenance cost with respect to the program. And it's related to the management of the program and equipment replacement as necessary. So all in all, I think the police budget is reasonable. I asked the chief if the budget was reasonable in order to meet expectations, or I should say service demands. And at this point, I think they're meeting expectations and responding appropriately. We should know, however, that they would like to do more proactive community policing, but under the current circumstances and the current staffing levels, and we know that there are 3 officers retiring starting next year, I believe, according to the Warren article, that they're responding and they're reacting and meeting the needs of the community.
Mike, did you get any sense with regards to what the service level has been for the third shift police? So, and by that I mean we're paying now to put people on where we haven't put them on before. What are they doing? And at some point, does that service warrant the additional expense of a third shift? That's sort of where the question ends up.
The third shift is essentially the night shift. And as you know from the discussion we had last year, the police station is not manned at night unless there is a prisoner in the cells.
Mhm.
And when there is a prisoner in the cells, they have to either bring in somebody off patrol or they have to call in overtime. And
I thought they'd also move them to another location.
if it's possible, you never know from night to night what's going to be going on in the town.
Yep.
I know one instance where there was just during the day, there was a major brawl of some pretty bad people at one of the rehab facilities, and Westborough had to call in community aid to help put it down. So, staffing will continue to be something that we'll probably be discussing as a committee with the police department. And it's that simple.
Mike, as part of the chief's conversation with us on the budget, it would be good if he could comment on where he's at compared to the staffing study that was done. I mean, we had a consultant do a staffing study. I don't have it at my fingertips, but from memory, we were well below the recommended staffing. And my sense is we haven't recovered. So it'd be kind of interesting, where are we at compared to the staffing study? And, what's sort of the outline of how we get from where we are to where the study recommends we be.
Well, I will let the chief speak to that. In fact, Hank, you're correct. We did have a conversation. I know that we're behind the staffing curve that was laid out by the consultants. And I also noted, I think I said earlier that there's a narrative in the book with respect to future conversations with the police department about staffing. So I think, not only the police chief can respond to that, I think we ought to ask the town manager what she had in mind when that was put in the narrative.
Good, that's good set of questions.
I do want to keep reminding, though, that as important as the staffing study is, it's a service department, and the question becomes, what are we failing to do on a service side? And proactive policing is certainly one of those options. But I'm also, I don't know if it's hawkish or dovish to say, I'm very reluctant to overly broaden a police in general beyond what they need, and they absolutely need the best to do what they do for their job. So I don't mean it in that regard, but the question is, how are we on our service curve, not just the study or recommendations for the staffing study.
So Andrew, are you asking about things like response times to emergency calls?
Yeah, we've talked about that. They're able to respond to meet expectations, I think. Look, I think one of the things we have to think about when we talk about service is emergency service versus other service. Emergency service, our perception of emergency service is really anticipatory. As long as we don't need it, we can have every conversation we want. But as soon as we need it, I think most people want the best trained folks with the best equipment in the quickest time. So, and that's a balancing act. And Andrew, you're correct. But I don't think that I want to second guess the police chief or the fire chief or anybody. But I will say your question is valid, because I think we as a committee should be asking each and every department head as to what they anticipate their service level to be in FY22 if they do not get their budget request fulfilled. And I think that's an answer that's a fair question, and that's an answer we should have.
Well, and I should also say that the third shift brings up a question not just of third shift for having a third shift per se, because the station's unmanned. By the way, the town has run fine for 300 years without a third shift police station. But the question becomes, if we have those resources who are working, are there opportunities for them to provide greater value to the town during shifts 1 and 2? So it's not even just a question of hacking away at third shifts. If we have the bodies, I absolutely trust the police chief to make sensible, rational decisions about what we need in emergency services. But I also want to make sure we're asking the question about are the resources allocated where they're providing the best utility for the town. So
Agreed. If you look at page 127, Andrew, there are some projections with respect to performance measures and calls for service. Again, projections, but I'm not gonna try to second guess the police department on these numbers. So I think the conversation is best had directly with the police chief. That's it for me.
All right, thanks, Mike. So next is Department of Public Works. Hank, was there anything you wanted to touch on there?
No, I mean, I haven't tried to meet with the department head until after we get the input, the basic data from him on what his plans are at this global summit. After which we'll meet with him. We'll go through all we'll go through the DPW, the fire department, the water and the sewer and the treatment plant stuff.
Yeah, and I did see on the proposed capital budget that he just has 3 vehicles listed, and he's got those spread across free cash, sewer, and water. So, I think, much down from what he came to us with in the fall.
Is that a new, I just noticed that last year where they're splitting a lot of vehicles that way. Is that a new trend? Maybe.
I don't know if it's new, but it's quite appropriate because we have a water department and a sewer department where the departmental expenses are liquidated by user fees, not by taxes. So cross-charging the expenses for capital equipment across the three funds is quite appropriate.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if
I have no idea whether it was.
if that funding
I don't-
wasn't there before in those other, coming in under those other fees.
I mean, you'd have to go back to prior town meetings to look. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't believe this is new. I don't believe this is new because we're just following
Makes sense.
standard accounting practice.
Yeah, and what you just said made more sense to me too. I was picturing that they were talking about this stuff just at those facilities, not out in the streets. They're talking about all this work.
No, again, they have equipment that they do sewer maintenance,
Yeah.
water maintenance.
Right.
And then
yeah.
there's another category that is not under the guise of the DPW, and that's the water treatment plant, which is under the guise of a separate water treatment board.
Right. I think we've split costs with them too on vehicles.
Yeah, but I think you're right, Paul. I don't know that it was this evenly distributed before. I think it was, some to DPW and then maybe some to sewer and water. And I
Right.
think this is a slightly different approach.
That sounds right too. Thank you.
All right. So let's see. So that brings us to Health and Human Services. Jody's a little under the weather tonight, couldn't make it. We can actually push questions on this section till Monday, if folks are okay with that. Also, under Culture and Recreation, we've got the library, which she was looking at, and the rec department.
I oversee rec department. This is Andrew, and I have not yet reached out to the rec, to Jen Kirkland, but I will be doing that this week.
All right. Cool. Thank you very much. The debt service, I took a look at. And, with the Fails project coming more online, definitely debt levels are coming up. I think a lot more of it is managed short-term. I think at some point it probably makes sense to have Leah Talbot come in and sort of just review this with us, and maybe at a separate meeting. To just go over through, there was a couple of numbers that didn't quite, I wasn't sure about, that I would want to follow up on. And then also, I think earlier, it ties in Mike's question about the statement that the debt strategy only included projects through 2019 town meeting. I believe that may still be the case.
Or it might have been updated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we've approved anything major since then. I think been some minor.
We haven't, but we again, we have a number of projects that are in the wings,
The warrant.
and particularly the library.
Right.
The library, we're being asked to provide money to hire an architect to start doing design work. And it's kind of a waste of money to go do the design work if you don't intend to fund the library. And at the moment, our strategy says we're not going to fund the library.
There's also the big projects on the warrant that look like they're appropriate for debt. Debt is one option, the way they're worded. But I think that's going to increase our debt too, beyond just Fails.
Which project is that?
There's the sprinkler system that off the top of my head. I'd have to go-
There's major school
Yeah,
maintenance projects. There's a roof replacement and a sprinkler system install. And there are additional major capital projects for school renovations and repairs that went to the capital review committee and were pushed off to future years. We got a lot of school deferred maintenance to deal with over the next 4 or 5 years.
but there are, I believe, I just went through it again today, but I believe there's millions in here on some big projects that borrow is an option on how to fund.
Well, I mean, and our basic funding strategy is to use free cash when we can.
Right.
I believe I have to go pull my warrant back up here. I lost my warrant. Where's my warrant? I lost the darn warrant. There
Oh,
it
what
is.
is the official warrant version we're on right now?
3.
Thank you.
3 is what I sent out today.
Oh, okay. I missed that.
Some of that debt I'm talking about will be within the sewer system, so it won't be on the, in the same category.
For capital projects?
Yeah, there's a treatment plant, 4 million. And a town sewer system update of 2 million. Those come out of other,
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Hastings School sprinkler system, it's $150,000. It says, and determine whether this amount should be raised by taxation, transfer from available funds, borrowing, or otherwise. So the warrant at the moment is saying that that's an open issue.
right?
I think the same is true on J, which is the petitions, and the football field improvement, and
Retracting wall?
the retracting wall. I
Right.
believe,
A lot of
I
expense.
don't see it in here, but in the background, there's a major replacement of roofs of the high school roof. I think that went before the capital review committee, and it must be pushed out to another year.
Future years, yes.
So, when we have the school department in to visit with us about capital and that, we ought to get them to give us some visibility on what their future needs are. And then we can deal with, is the intent to bond it out, or the intent to pay it out of free cash.
Let me go through, I think, the questions that I have so far, and confirm that I have what we covered today. So question regarding us, revenue getting back to pre-COVID levels. The commentary there, when it looks like some of the estimates in Appendix D and or E don't match that. And sort of just getting an update on that. There's a question on the funds that were used by the Council on Aging during this budget cycle that aren't available in the next budget cycle. And so that's like a $40,000 increase that we're going to be that we're going to have to take on in that budget. Review of the assessed valuations and why on the commercial valuation specifically, what's causing us to kind of expect that reduction going forward. On page 15, there's an estimate with the state aid going down in 2026. Is there something that's triggering that we know about, or what's causing that projection? Let's see, the general discussion of the capital projects and the debt strategy and sort of what, with certainly debt items coming up, minor ones this year, but then major ones coming up within the next couple of years, like what's our expectation? Right now, we're hearing the terms alternative strategies. What does that mean and what's our thinking there? Especially if we're going to start investing in the library project this year, at least making some initial monies available. I'll mention in when I send these to Christy, I'll leave them up to her whether or not she wants to come to a future meeting or whether or not these are for folks for next Thursday, and she can, let us know. OPEB, in the discussion around OPEB, and we're talking about not funding it again this year. Is that, next year, do we definitely, or is our expectation we're going to start funding it again the following year? And I'll mention to her, just a question came up, or discussion came up around grant writing and, strategies for grant writing and stuff. And is that something they're talking about? I don't even know if I need to mention the police staffing study. I'm assuming it's going to be a central part of what the chief's going to talk about on next Thursday. Yeah, I don't know if we need to give him a heads up on that or not.
It's always nice to give him a heads up and formally say it out loud.
Yeah. And those, I think, are the questions I had. Did I miss anything? No. I have a question for the information technology group. Could I get a little tutorial on how to set up a Zoom meeting? But that's really just for me. So,
Yeah.
all right. So in terms of review of the budget book, people feel like we're good for now. There was a couple of things we had to skip. And do we still want to meet on Monday to go over the few sections that we couldn't go over tonight, or what do people think?
I'd be comfortable waiting to a week from Monday. I'm assuming coming out of Thursday's meeting, I'm going to have a whole new list of questions and things to talk about. I mean, I'm assuming that I'm going to get educated quite a bit. And usually when I get educated, I have more questions.
Yeah, and it's tough. I think the hope is that with these full day off sites that we get the answers we're looking for from the department head, so we don't have questions going forward. And I think with a lot of the department heads, I imagine that will be the case, but there may be some isolated cases where we are going to have future questions. But, to the extent that we can make an effort to try and get everything answered next Thursday, that'd be great.
So is next Thursday's meeting that you keep calling offsite, is it going to be in fact an online meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
So I sent out in this morning's with the other documents, an initial agenda for that meeting. And I believe it started at 8:30. And then it goes through and it has
Got it.
police, fire, school. If anybody has any questions on that agenda, be happy to, something that they wanted to see specifically on the agenda that they don't see, let me know, but I think it covers the majority of the major town functions.
I'm looking for, I know you sent the agenda. I'm just looking through my papers because I did have a question. They're inviting the capital equipment or the capital project, capital expenditures planning committee as well. That's what it says up at the top. What is that all about?
So that's the group of
Yeah.
us that gets together and formally addresses capital concerns. It's where we sit down and look at the longer term plans, how things are falling over the years, and we go into a deeper dive with each of the departments that's asking for a capital plan,
Yeah,
or funds for a capital plan.
Thank you. I understand that, Andrew, but it talks about a public hearing.
Yeah, I believe it's the charter or the bylaws that set up the capital expenditures planning committee require that there's a joint hearing of them before the Board of Selectmen every year. So I think that's why it's called out as a hearing.
Gotcha.
I think that's in the bylaws somewhere. I can look it up if you want.
No, I was just inquisitive about.
Yeah.
So John, is that the 8:30 to 9:30 piece?
Let me pull that up because I've had so many versions going. Let me just take a look. The meeting agenda revision. Hang on.
Public hearing, fiscal 22 budget.
The public hearing is 8:30 to 9:30.
Yeah, and that may just be the capital expenditures planning committee. Okay.
Yeah. Is this for the 28th? The meeting on the 28th?
Yes.
Sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. Yes, I believe I looked at that a while back. I think that's right.
It really doesn't, it says for FY22 budget, so on 2022 budget, so I'm assuming it's the entire budget.
Yeah, let me just see if I can find it.
I'll check with the town manager and
Maybe the first hour is the more general things, and then we jump into the part.
yeah.
Well, I think it makes sense for them to be there since many of the, warrant articles which are being presented by the different departments, because that's kind of given to us as a committee as kind of, oh, they approved this, and that makes me feel better, but it doesn't always answer, and then it ends up we're asking the same questions that they've already covered maybe. So I think it's good to have them combined in that way. It's only a few people probably. How many? Like 5 or something?
I think there's 7, but then it includes a selectman, it includes the treasurer. Andrew represents us. There's somebody on the planning board. So there's probably only like 3 or 4 people who wouldn't normally be at this meeting.
Yeah.
I finally pulled up the agenda. I believe that the fact that it says joint budget meeting, Board of Selectmen Finance Committee includes budget hearing with Capital Expenditures Planning Committee. My guess is that 8:30 meeting is probably the hearing that the Capital Expenditures Planning Committee is supposed to have, and will probably also incorporate the usual joint meeting of the Selectmen and Finance Committee, where the town manager sort of officially presents the budget. So my guess is that's all just, sort of the ritual of the various hearings that are called for in bylaws.
Okay. So, John, thank you very much. So I've got the handful of questions I'll send to the town manager. We feel comfortable that we don't need a meeting on Monday.
Well, do we think Jody's going to want to present what she did in advance?
I can reach out to her. And we have an agenda out there. So,
Right.
they should have something out there. So, we can always have it. Or, she could possibly just send,
Seems like we would have, well, if she really would like to do that, that's fine. If not, it seems like we'll have enough meetings after this other meeting to cover
Yeah.
all sorts of things. And as Hank said, I have a feeling we may have more questions after than before.
I'll check with her if she's gone through and there is something that she feels is, that definitely needs to be asked. I'll try and get that from her before the meeting. And see if I can get that over
Okay,
to the department heads. So we're okay there and, because I think the library is probably, I don't see the library on here. So I think the library is coming to a meeting after this.
right.
Okay. All right. So Monday, we're off. I will cancel that. And then we've got Thursday, the 28th. I guess if we look to discuss future draft agendas, pardon me while I pull up my calendar. Okay. So the following Monday is the 1st. Having that all day on the 28th. Do we want to do a short on February 1st to review what we learned and sort of set our schedule through town meeting?
Sounds good.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yep, sounds good.
I think we'll also have a better sense of whether the town meeting is being pushed back or thought about being pushed back.
Right.
So it'll help us schedule.
Right. So, yeah. Good point. So are we gonna, we'll know whether or not we're gonna need to speed it up or we can take it down a notch. So, okay. So I will put out an agenda for February 1st with just sort of a general review of the budget and warrant and creation of future draft agendas and meeting dates. And we'll work from there. And I'm sure we'll be talking about it next Thursday as well.
One question, Sean, is you've mentioned in the past something about somebody that needed us to sign off money on the senior center or something like that. Is that not happening or not? I mean, that would be, that's not needed on Monday or something. Is it?
Oh, sorry, Walter, I missed part of that.
Oh, you had talked in the emails about the possibility of a need for someone from the
Oh,
fund.
yes. So,
Do we have a formal transfer request?
right. The head of building and grounds, they had to do some work at the Council on Aging, at the senior center and the emergency. And so with the gas line or something. So they went ahead and did it, but it is going to put their budget a little short. So I think at some point, they're going to need to come before us to see if they can get that money back, or else come the end of the year, they're not going to have enough. So,
Not urgent. kind of.
I'll,
Well, yeah, there's a formal process where they execute, where they initiate a transfer request. And until they initiate the transfer request, we don't have any action to take.
so, I will actually reach out to him individually. Just to sort of confirm the urgency of the request, and we can figure that out and get him in here as soon as possible. I think it was like 20,000 or something, so. All right, no, thank you all. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, are there any liaison reports? Where did I just add them? Okay. All right. So I think we're ready. See everybody 8:30 a.m. on Thursday. Is there any other business, or do we have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mike. Have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Walter, thank you very much. I'll
You're
go around. Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Ms. Ford,
You're muted, Melanie.
Sorry, Ford, yes.
and Mr. Beretti.
Yes.
Keo, yes. All right, everyone, thank you very much.
Thank you, Poole.
Just joining the meeting. I'll see you Thursday.
Thank you. Good
Okay.
night.
Thank you for all three meetings.
Right.